Hey, there, it's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks. The two girls both looked sullen as they continued to stare at me. Over their heads I noticed the two college girls leaving the shop, which was something of a relief. At least now I could loose the feminine pronouns, which were being fired at me. I waited for a while, considering when would be the best moment to suggest I took the dress off, since I couldn't have it. Well, I could make a deal with you, said Sylvia, stepping in front of me, and addressing Anita. A deal, she asked. Yes. I could always do with some extra help around here, especially at this time of year. Maybe you could work off the debt. Anita looked shocked for a moment. You mean me work in here with you and Sue? Sylvia grinned in response. I wasn't so much thinking of you, my dear. She turned to face me. I was thinking of her, she declared, triumphantly pointing in my direction. Anita turned to face me again, with a thoughtful expression. That might work, she conceded. What do you say, Sarah? I'm not working in a boutique. I spluttered. Anyway, it would put the customers off, having a boy serving them. You don't have to be a boy, Sylvia said, conspiratorially, with a wide grin on her face. No, agreed Anita. You could work in here as Sarah. It would be fun. Oh yes, agreed Sue. I was astounded that they could think that this was a good idea. There was no way I was going to give up my valuable time to dress as a girl and serve in a boutique. Well, I'm not going to do it. Once this contest is out of the way, that's the end of Sarah. I declared with venom. Oh, come on, Steve, pleaded Anita, obviously forgetting my temporary name in her anguish. It'd only be for a few days. Yeah, agreed Sue enthusiastically. I earn £20 a day here, so that would only be 2. Well, there was some talk about her having a suspender belt as well, butted in Sylvia, so I think it would have to be 3. I stared from one to the other. This was unbelievable. Did they really expect me to dress up as a girl for 3 Saturdays just to be able to wear this damned dress? Anita stared earnestly at me. Please, Steve. You're absolutely bound to win if you wear that, honestly. That's right, agreed Sue. No one else will have anything anywhere near as pretty. No, I said firmly. I won't do it. I can't. Pretty please, pleaded Anita, her eyes boring into mine. I felt backed into a corner with no way out. Well, let's think about it, I said eventually. We ought to ask Nikki as well anyway, she might be put out if I don't wear what she sorted out for me. Anita continued to look forlornly at me for some moments, and I braced myself for the next attack, but it never came. Well, all right. We'll ask Nikki when she gets back. I breathed a sigh of relief. Well, I'd best go and get changed back, I suggested. Don't be silly, exclaimed Anita. No, agreed Sue. Nikki needs to be able to see what you look like in that to make her mind up. Yeah, agreed Sue. And so it was that I spent the next 15 minutes in the shop wearing a long pink evening gown, waiting interminably for the return of Nikki. Customers came and went, and all of them looked with curiosity at me. Several took brochures of the higher wear, which pleased Sylvia no end, and reinforced her desire for me to work at the shop. See, she declared as one of the customers left. It's really good for sales to have a pretty young thing in a nice frock in the shop. The waiting seemed to go on forever, but at last Nikki came back into the shop, carrying a bag of groceries. Anita rushed over to her almost as soon as she was through the door. You must come and see Sarah in her dress, she exclaimed. We want to know whether you think she should have it for the contest or not. I flinched at the feminine pronouns, which had been much in evidence when there were customers in the shop. I decided Anita must have forgotten there was nobody there at the time who didn't know I was a boy. Nikki looked strangely unenthusiastic as she put her shopping bag down and walked over to examine me. She tilted her head first to one side and then the other, and she gazed at the new pink me. "It's not bad," she announced eventually. "Not bad," exclaimed Anita. "It's wonderful. Look at it." She walked over to me and lifted some of the material to show Nikki the quality. "If we have her in that for the final, she's bound to win." Nikki shrugged. "Maybe, but she hasn't even tried on the dress I sorted out for her. We ought to see what she looks like in that before making up our mind." There was a petulant note to her voice. "But is it as nice as this one?" asked Anita, oblivious to Nikki's distress. "Well, I think so, but there again I would," Nikki said, rather curtly. "After all, we agreed that I'd be sorting out the outfit for the final, and that you could do the school uniform." There was an awkward silence for a moment. Nikki was obviously upset that she had nearly lost her chance to put me in a dress of her own choosing. "Yes, of course. I'm sorry," Anita said eventually. "Sorry, Sylvia, we probably won't be having the dress, and you won't be having Sarah in the shop helping." Sylvia simply shrugged. "There'll be other times," she said obscurely. "Still, if you change your minds, you know where we are." "Yes," agreed Anita. "Well, if that's that, I'll help the young lady out of her dress then," she went on. "I'm not a young lady," I declared. Sylvia looked at me with curiosity in her eyes. "Aren't you now? That could be interesting. Come on, let's get you out of that dress then." I followed her back through to the changing room, leaving the three girls in the shop, and hoping that Nikki and Anita would make up. The last thing I needed was those two having a flaming row before I could get back to being a boy. I stood in the changing room, while Sylvia undid the zip on the dress. "It really is a shame you won't be wearing this for the contest, you know," she told me. I didn't respond. "You look really lovely in it. Like a debutante." I grimaced, but didn't say anything. She pulled the dress from my shoulders and helped it slip down my back. "You know, if you ever wanted to try it on again," she began. "No thanks," I said quickly. "Or any of the others," she continued. "You wouldn't have to work in the shop, you know, if that's what puts you off." She pulled the dress down over my bottom and held it while I stepped out of it. Once I was free of it, she shook it a few times and retrieved its hanger from one of the coat hooks on the wall. "I'd be happy to take you to dinner wearing it, or to the theater or something." "Do you like the theater, Sarah?" "No," I replied, "and my name is Steve." I was getting annoyed with her languid, seductive tone. She seemed to have put it on deliberately to humiliate me further. She looked at me with her head tilted. "But I like you so much better as Sarah," she said, smiling. She took the dress and its hanger back into the other room, and pleased to be alone, I picked up Anita's jumper from the bench and began to put it on. It took me a while to lift it over my bra, so by the time my eyes were free again, Sylvia was back. She walked over to the bench and picked up the slip, holding it up to look at it carefully, examining the hem with the scallops and rosebuds between her fingers. "Don't forget your lovely little slip," she said, handing it to me. I frowned. Her behavior was becoming even more eccentric by the minute. I took the nylon monstrosity and, holding the elastic wide, stepped into it and lifted it to my waist. "Very nice," she whispered. "A boy in a slip. Very nice." I tried to ignore her and reached for my skirt. She got there first and held it for me. "In you get," she urged, still using her seductive tones. "Into your nice little skirt, Sarah, there's a good girl." I glared at her, but this did not change the smile on her face. I stepped into the denim skirt and tried to grab the waistband, but she held it firm. "I'll pull it up for you, darling," she whispered. She lifted the skirt up my legs and into place, careless of the mess this made of my slip. Pushing my hands away, she did up the little button at the front and lifted the zip, patting it when she had finished. "Very nice," she said, looking down at me and putting her hands on my shoulders. "I do think it's good when boys wear skirts," she said, smiling broadly. "I need to put my boots back on," I said, nervously. She released my shoulders and watched me as I sat down on the bench, trying desperately to make sure my knickers did not show. I managed it, but when I came to put the boots back on, my decorum was ruined. "Oh dear," she declared, "naughty little Sarah's showing her knickers." "Well, you shouldn't be looking if you don't want to see," I retorted, remembering this from what Anita had said to me once. "I didn't say I didn't want to see them," Sylvia went on, grinning wildly now. "You can flash your knickers to me anytime you want." I glared at her again and went back to trying to get my boots on as decorously as possible. Eventually I succeeded, but not without offering Sylvia a good few more glimpses of my flowery underwear. I breathed a sigh of relief when I was done. Now at last I could free myself from this mad woman. I stood up and went to move to the curtain that led to the shop. Sylvia stood in my way, towering over me, and smiling oddly. "Not so fast, young lady," she said, "let me sort your slip out first. It's in a bit of a mess." "I'll do it," I said hurriedly, holding firmly to the hem of my skirt. "Oh no. You won't," Sylvia replied, "it's the least I can do after all the fun you've given me today." I held the hem of the skirt firmly down between my legs, but she grabbed it from the side and lifted it up my thighs, standing only inches from me, and staring with a leer into my face. I could smell her breath, spicy from some strange food she must have eaten the night before. My breathing became shallow and fast, and I was genuinely frightened of what she might do. "Stop it," I whispered. She smiled even wider. "Now you told me that you were no lady," she began, her hand moving to the inside of my thigh and stroking my leg through my tights. I tried to push her away, but somehow couldn't. "Let's give you another little lesson in being a girl, shall we?" "No," I bleated, "please." Her eyes became wilder and her smile broader as I pleaded with her to stop. Her hand moved up to between my legs and stroked me gently through the knickers and the tights. Her face bore down onto mine, and she began to kiss me tenderly on the forehead. I was by now in a blind panic, my legs shook as I tried to get my face away. I managed to get my hands up between us and pushed as hard as I could against her, but I just fell back against the wall. She began to laugh, quietly but cruelly. "I was raped once," she told me. "It's not very pleasant, is it?" I thought perhaps I had seen a glimpse of where her madness was coming from, and shook my head enthusiastically. "No," I whispered hoarsely in reply, hoping she would stop. "But you're really asking for it, wearing a tiny little skirt like that." The hand between my legs began to knead at me more urgently, and I heard myself whimpering in fright. I was feeling dizzy and insecure as I had never felt before, as Sylvia's mouth came down on mine, and, forcing it open, allowed her tongue to snake into mine. "Is everything all right?" The words cut through the haze, and immediately Sylvia backed away from me. It was Anita. "Yes, everything's fine," responded Sylvia, standing tall and moving away from me. "I was just helping your friend Sarah here with her slip." It got a bit rumpled when she put her skirt back on. I was still leaning against the wall, unable to move. Anita looked at me with concern and then at Sylvia. "Sue asked if you could come through and help. There are a couple of customers who want some advice on stuff she doesn't know about." "Oh, fine," said Sylvia breezily, and she sauntered past Anita and through the curtain. Are you all right, Steve? Asked Anita, moving over towards me. I tried to lift myself away from the wall, but fell back again. My hand instinctively pulled at my skirt at the front to try and straighten it, and then, suddenly, I gave a single huge sob. Oh, Steve, what's the matter? Anita said, coming over to me, and pulling my head onto her shoulder. I shook my head, but was unable to speak. Anita's shoulder felt warm and comfortable, and her perfume filled my head. The silken softness of her hair caressed my face, mingling with the strands from the wig. Suddenly I felt so ashamed. I had burst out crying in front of the girl I loved because some other woman had had her hand up my skirt. Despite the warmth and loveliness of being held by Anita, I pulled my head up away from her. It's all right, I hissed, just a bit of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? What do you mean? Asked Anita, still holding the sides of my head. I shook my head again. Nothing, I'm all right. Anita took her hands away, and found a tissue from her bag. Here you are. Dry your face. Come on, otherwise your mascara will run. Thanks, I responded weakly, taking the tissue, and dabbing my face with it. I sniffed a bit, and when I took the tissue away, was surprised to see it having a vaguely pink hue. Are you sure you're all right? Anita asked again. I nodded, and managed to respond yes. Can we leave now though? I think I've had enough of this shop. Anita still looked concerned, but eventually said. Yes. We're about done here anyway. Come on, let's go, shall we? She smiled at me. I managed to smile back, although running the gauntlet of the shop, especially with Sylvia in there, played on my mind. You'd best sort yourself out a bit first though, Anita went on. I looked at her puzzled. Your skirt, she whispered, gesturing downwards with her head. It's a bit crumpled still. I looked down at myself, and saw that she was right. As expertly as I could, I put my hand up it to straighten out the slip, and then tried to smooth the skirt back into place over it. That's better, declared Anita. Come on, we'll go. We walked back through the curtain to the glare of the shop. It was quite full, for which I was actually grateful this time. Both Sue and Sylvia were serving people, and having paused briefly to orientate ourselves, Anita and I moved purposefully towards the street door. Sue turned briefly to wave to us, but Sylvia paid us no attention, and suddenly we were outside. I heaved a huge sigh of relief, but in my hurry to get out of the shop, accidentally bumped into a young boy of about 12. Hey, watch where you're going, he snapped. I was flustered. Oh. Sorry, are you all right? He looked at me appraisingly for a second or two. Yeah, it's all right. Nice tits by the way, and then swaggered proudly up the high street. Anita seemed to pay him little attention, although I watched him for a moment as we merged into the crowd. What was going on in there? Anita demanded. It looked like you were getting a bit friendly. I looked into her blue eyes. If I told her the truth, it would look pathetic. It was nothing, I said, shaking my head. Sylvia just got a bit enthusiastic about straightening my slip, that's all. Anita looked at me disbelievingly, then why were you crying? I looked at the floor between us. I could hardly deny that I had been. I shrugged. I don't know, I replied eventually. I suppose it's because I'm not used to that sort of thing. What sort of thing? I shrugged again. Well, being treated like a girl, I suppose. I decided to try and change the subject. Where's Nikki? She's gone home. She wanted to take that shopping back. Please subscribe for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.